I'm your chair. I'm your chair, Steve Fancher. Can we do roll call, Wendy?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Nancy Hendrickson,
Here.
Steve Fancher,
Here.
Eric Mueller,
Here.
Dave Rittmer,
Here.
Beth Reeser,
Here.
Ashton Simpson.
Here.
Lori Stegman.
Here.
And Ken Anderson not present. Corky Collier,
Here.
James Allison,
Here.
Mary Helen Kincaid indicated she would be late. Tanny Stephenson,
Here.
Eric Molander,
Here.
Ed Washington, Bob Salinger, Heather King.
Here.
Twelve members are present.
Excellent. Thank you, Wendy. I'll also want to note that Emerald Bogue with the Port of Portland's joined us. Welcome. And we'll be voting on her addition to this board after we approve the minutes. So let's move there now. We have the January minutes from our January 4th work session and January 19th board meeting. And those were included in your materials. I think they're pages 2 through 12.
And I'll just make note, there was one correction that I emailed out yesterday.
So I'll entertain a motion to approve those amended minutes as most recently sent out by Wendy.
I move approval of the minutes as sent out by Wednesday, by Wendy.
I'll
Thank you,
second
Eric.
that.
Yeah, we've got a motion by Eric. I heard the second by Tanny just before Corky. He
Okay.
beat you to it. To approve.
Darn.
Yeah, darn. To approve the January minutes from the January 4th work session and the January 19th board meeting. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, let's just do a voice vote here. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we are going to move, and this official items included in page 13 of your packet, and this is to appoint Emerald Bogue as the Port of Portland representative to this board, replacing Ken Anderton. And this, just a little bit of background, on February 8th, the Board of Commissioners for the Port voted to designate Emerald as the representative replacing Ken. And our bylaws require the board to consider the appointment and take a vote. Welcome. Like to say anything?
Yep, we've got it right here.
There we, oh, double mics. Hi, everybody. My name is Emerald Bogue. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Policy and Regional Affairs at the Port of Portland. You all know Ken Anderton really well. I know Ken Anderton really well. We work hand in hand. This issue definitely sits, the issues that we're talking about here definitely intersect properties and public policy and regional affairs. So I'm really happy to be here, serve in this capacity, and thank you. Yeah.
So at this point, we'd entertain a motion again. If you turn to page 13 of your board packet, there is a little bit of language that might help you with a motion. But staff's asking our board to vote to appoint a new director for the following position as required by ORS 550. It's H, one director representing the Port of Portland, appointed by the Board of Commissioners of the Port of Portland.
I will very happily move that we appoint Emerald Bogue to the board.
Thank you, Corky. We have a motion by Corky to appoint Emerald Bogue to the board. Do I have a second? We have a motion. We have- That doesn't look good. Oh, they're back. Can you guys hear us still?
Yeah. Now we can't hear you.
I'll use the pause to clean the seed out of my teeth.
Okay.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Oh, we're having some internet issues apparently.
Okay, just to remind everyone, we have a motion on the table by Corky to appoint Emerald Bogue to this board. We have a second by Tanny Stephenson. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I think we're going to take a voice vote on this one too. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. Welcome. Welcome. Okay, turning it over to Jim now to talk about
Hi.
transition.
Thanks. I just am going to take a minute or two right now. Wendy sent out yesterday a copy of a document called a Declaration of Cooperation. And my intent in sending it out was just to, I wake up most mornings remembering that I'm standing on the shoulders of a whole bunch of awesome community leaders who have come before me. And many of you have been at this now for a really long time, like 10 years. And that Declaration of Cooperation sort of codifies the fact that the United States Congress has identified our work as a national priority, and the state has designated it through Oregon Solutions as a state priority. And it is, of course, just by virtue of all of you being here, a regional priority. And boy, a lot of hard work's been done, and a lot of really awesome creativity and collaboration and compromise has really taken us to this point. And all the jurisdictions represented and interests represented at this table declared that they were very intent on achieving PMLS certification and accreditation. And so we're on that path, and that even led to sort of almost unanimous adoption in the legislature of the work plan that we are implementing today. And I guess I just want to note for all of us, and I don't know whether you guys can still hear me, but I'm going to keep talking. We're at almost the hardest part of this effort. There's been so much amazing collaboration and creativity as we've worked through all these things, but now is when the rubber's really hitting in the road, and we have to talk about money, sort of allocate those costs. So I guess I just wanted to remind you all that this is the hard part, and the interests that you're representing and the positions that you're bringing to the table are all really critical. The reason we've gotten as far as we've been able to obtain results that work for everybody. From Wood Village to Portland to Troutdale, right? We've all figured out ways to come together and make this thing work. So as we get to the really hard parts, I'm hoping you can just remember that we are taking advantage of a bunch of really good historic work, and we really have to kind of maintain that sense of creativity and innovation and collaboration if we're going to land this thing. And I hope you agree with me that the risks are real and the opportunities are great. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and say, before I turn the mic back over, thank you all very, very much for the time and energy you're putting into this work. Your staff really appreciates you, and we know you represent really important voices. So please bring those voices to the table, speak to your interests, and help us find a solution that works for everybody. Thanks.
Well said, Jim. Could you say we're at the peak of the hydrograph? Feels like it. Okay, let's move on to our next item on the agenda, and I'm going to turn it over to Aster, Moulton, and Jamie to talk about the Flood Safe Columbia River Working Outreach Group that we discussed at the last meeting. Are you guys ready to go?
Yep, I'm ready.
Take it away.
Aster, I'm starting this off, yeah?
Sounds good.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And some of these slides should look familiar because we talked about them last time. So there's So some of these slides will look familiar. We want to remind you about where we are in this process. We introduced this idea of the board and community liaisons group at your last meeting. And since then, we've undergone a little bit of a name change because we realized that the board and community liaisons name didn't necessarily convey what the group did. And so Astor and I put our heads together, and they shopped it around within the staff team. And what we ended up with was the education and engagement work group, because we feel like that conveys more what this group is all about. So I just have a couple slides. So just a reminder of where we are in the overall process. The green is the GeoBond, and we're here at the beginning around the process recommendations. And also to remind you about the Noah Siegel's presentation about the steps in developing a GeoBond, and that the first step is establishing leadership, and we have that in all of you, and we want to augment that with our education and engagement work group. The purpose of the work group, as we talked about last time, is to work together to refine the approach for engaging communities of interest and historically underserved communities in the work of the district, and to synthesize information gathered from community input and provide the board with recommendations to help guide deliberation and decision making. And for those, any of you that missed the last meeting, we actually also had a conversation about whether or not this group is a public body and subject to the public meetings law, and we decided that it is, and that we should err on the side of transparency and providing more opportunities for the public to hear about your work. So as a reminder, there's two pieces to this work group. One part is are the board liaisons, and the second part are the community liaisons. And the board liaisons, as we talked at the last meeting, when we introduced this concept, we had come up with some criteria that we thought would help the chair to appoint the board liaison members. And this is the criteria that we came up with. It's the same ones we talked about at the last time. And then we had kind of an unofficial people throwing their hat in the ring from the last meeting that they would be interested. And so what we have for you today and is a resolution for the chair to walk through for all of you that gives the chair the authority to put in place this subcommittee of your board that's focused on education and engagement, and gives the chair the authority to appoint subcommittee members. And the appointments don't need to happen at this meeting, but it would be helpful to find out who all is interested. And when we introduced this at the last meeting, the folks who have stepped forward who said they were interested are Metro Councilor Ashton Simpson, Bob Salinger, Corky Collier, and more recently, Heather King. And we also had talked about we're really looking for 3 people because we want to keep the group small and nimble. And it isn't to exclude folks. Again, these meetings are open to the public. That means they're open to all of you as well. But we really wanted just a small, nimble group to work on behalf of the board together with community liaisons. And then, Astor, I'm going to turn to you. I have one more slide about next steps. Should I do that slide and then turn it back over to Chair Fancher for the resolution?
Yeah, I think moving on to the next slide makes sense, and
Okay.
just giving a little bit more context of next steps once these board liaisons get appointed.
Great. So the last slide I have for you is just giving you an idea of what's happening next. So the chair will appoint the board liaisons, assuming that you support the resolution. And there'll be some discussion that the chair will initiate with all of you prior to your opportunity to weigh in on the resolution. And then we're going to do a first meeting with the board liaisons to discuss criteria for the community liaisons, identify potential community liaison participants, and develop an approach for initial conversations with those participants, because we recognize that board liaisons have networks, we have networks, and we want to make sure that we've put our best foot forward in making those initial conversations. And then once we settle on a roster and a list, we're going to bring that recommendation to the board for all of you at your board meeting on March 16th. And then we hope that we'll be ready to go after that March 16th board meeting of all of you to have our first full work group meeting in early April. And then we anticipate 5 to 6 meetings of that group throughout the course of the rest of this year. Esther, anything I missed?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand it back to you, Chair Fancher.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Astor. Wow, so much responsibility. I'm not quite sure I can take all of this, and we'll see if you guys trust me enough to pass this resolution. But I'll say my intent would be to appoint those that have expressed interest. I know we've talked about trying to get the group down to 3. Maybe there's some opportunity between Bob and Heather to share roles a little bit there. So if we need to be nimble and then get it down to 3, that might be something we consider. But other than that, I would intend to appoint those that have expressed that interest. I also want to say that because she wasn't here at the last meeting, I did reach out to Mary Helen Kincaid. She has such great expertise in this space, and we had a conversation about this. Because this group we envision it to have a lot of face-to-face contact with groups out there. She's not in a position to serve in the official capacity on that, but she is interested in whatever role she could play in advising as a member of this board, kind of the direction that group takes. So at this point, I just want to open it up to board discussion and anybody else expressing interest, wanting to yeah, I'll just open it up.
I had a question, I guess maybe I didn't follow it quite well enough. I was trying to understand, like, there's the board liaisons and there's the community liaisons and there's commingling of those, or those are overlapping or separated. I'm not quite sure I understand how that works.
Chair, can I clarify?
Yes, please, Jamie.
Thanks for that question. So there's one work group and it's the Education and Engagement Work Group. So it's one group and it's made up of 3 board liaisons and 4 to 6 community liaisons, depending on, it's a little bit open for discussion there, but it's just one group.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sure. No worries.
Corky, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to recognize, seeing our names up there on the list, with the exception of Councilor Simpson, you've got 3 nonprofit leaders in there. I don't know if that's good or bad. I presume that's intentional, but I just kind of wanted to raise that and make sure that we are intentional about that. I don't, I can see some advantages and disadvantages, but it just sort of struck me when I saw the list. So I raise it for discussion.
Thank you, Corky. Yes, Nancy?
So I guess I'm not really going to speak to that. I don't have an opinion other than to say that I think any one of our 17 board members who volunteers for something, I'm just giving you a big thumbs up. I did want to mention, I think 4 is still pretty nimble. So 3 or 4 is fine with me. When you get to 10 or 12, then talk about that. But I appreciate our board volunteers.
Wendy?
I think there will be public meetings as well. I think we just need to pay attention to getting to an urban board quorum, because those will be noticed as a working group meeting.
That info. More discussion? Questions? Eric?
Yes, is it our intent to get someone from the urban growth boundary on the west side of town? I know that you have somebody from Portland, somebody from East County, but I'm particularly interested in having the voice of the semiconductor industry in this because of the importance of PDX to their supply chain. And this is a group that knows nothing about our work. They just sort of, it's part of the infrastructure. It just goes on and on and on. And Hopefully they never have to learn about it, right? But it's one of the things that as an educational element is going to be a particular challenge.
I think that's a great idea. And I'm gonna turn to our engagement experts, but I think that's the type of representative we'd love to see on the community liaison side. And so it'd be really valuable to find somebody willing to help us spread that message. So great idea. Did I get that right, team?
Yeah, both Aster and I unmuted at the same time. I think your instinct is right, Jim. On the community liaison side would be great. And Eric, certainly if you have any names, once we develop the criteria, that would be wonderful. Aster, I don't know if you have some more to share.
Yeah, I think just to clarify, in the same way that we developed criteria for who we might appoint for the board liaisons, we do want to develop similar criteria for who the community liaisons should represent as well. And we'll work with the board liaisons to refine that. And we welcome any input from anyone on the board.
And if there is board members that ask connections into that would be awesome too. Others.
I can speak to that a little bit, sorry, folks. Hi. We definitely, the airport is an asset for the whole region, right? And so I doubt it's rattling around in anyone's mind right now that what if the airport weren't dry? So that is sort of an indirect impact that is sometimes underappreciated. Definitely hear that. I think it's really important that the interest of business is represented on this. And Corky, I know you're there. And I know that there could probably be other interests from other business organizations or leaders from other parts of the region who recognize the significance, and we're happy to brainstorm.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Great discussion. Any other comments, questions? This is an important item. I'm not hearing anything. The resolution is on pages 16 and 17 of your board packet. Relatively short and sweet. Resolution number 2023-02-01. And I would entertain a motion if anyone's ready.
Mr. Chair, I would move adoption of resolution number 23-201, establishing the Flood Safe Columbia River Education and Engagement Work Group.
Thank you, Eric. Can I ask where you read that from?
Oh, I read it from
I was
staff record.
got it. The
Trying to
page
follow
before-
directions.
the page before the resolution. Thank you very much. Eric's got it. So we have a motion on the table from Eric Mueller. We have a second from Nancy Hendrickson. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'm not hearing any. Let's go through a roll call vote on this.
Nancy Hendrickson,
Yes.
Steve Fancher,
Yes.
Eric Mueller,
Yes.
Dave Ritma,
Yes.
Seth Reeser,
Yes.
Ashton Simpson,
Yes.
Lori Stegman,
Yes.
Corky Collier,
Yes.
James Allison,
Yes.
Tanny Stephenson,
Yes.
Eric Molander,
Yes.
Bob Salinger,
Yes.
Heather King.
Yes.
Motion passes. And if, well, we're not super official. Yeah,
Oh, she hasn't signed her.
haven't signed. That's okay. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Could everyone-
Mr. Chair, if I may,
could everyone please move the microphone close to you when you speak?
I
for the
want
benefit
to
of those online.
just, in addition to Aster and Jamie, who've done a lot of work on this, Hong and Armand, were really instrumental in helping us shape this in a way that ensured we were well clear of any issues with transparency in public meetings. So I just want to make sure you are aware that they worked hard to make sure we did that well. So thanks to our legal team for keeping us in the transparency realm. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Okay, we're down to item 6 on our agenda, and I should mention the motion did pass unanimously. I guess I didn't say that. So item 6 on our agenda, starting with Emily for the MPD staff hours for Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District.
Sure. I think at the last meeting, we discussed that, like the forecasted budgeted hours, staff hours were more than expected this year when looking at the year-end values. And so you all just asked us to kind of do an audit of the work that's been done and which staff and how many hours. And there's information in the packet that goes into more detail, but we just wanted to let you know that we had looked into that. We didn't indicate anything unusual, and it was sort of the staff and the type of work it was as expected. Are there any questions on that piece?
And that's page 19 of the board packet, I believe.
Eric?
Yeah, so you've done a great job of identifying the object code, which is labor. And the thing, we have the department code. What we're missing in this is the purpose code, the to it end, what elements of the projects they were working on and what the outcomes from that were. And one of the things that I would want to have in future discussions of this is really beyond just how many hours that Ben Rhodes spent on our work, that what was really the outcome of that. So do you, Emily, are you comfortable with the sense of a purpose code, a to an end? You know, what are the things that it is driving us toward?
We're tracking operations projects. We would have to think about how we would enter that into our system currently, because a lot of us are direct billed and so on. So we don't have a mechanism, but I appreciate the intent of your desire. So Lori is on a much deserved vacation, so I don't want to speak for her.
So we can table this until Lori is back and have a further discussion about what do we need in terms of financial reporting so that we have adequate oversight and understanding of where we're spending our money.
Yep. We definitely want to try and provide that. I guess one caution is just some of the systems we have are not well suited to that level of detail and with the 7 boards. So we've been sort of thinking of this as a post establishment thing. But again, I recognize the desire for oversight and want to find a way to answer those questions for you all, because you deserve to have those answers. And candidly, we are proud of the work we're doing and happy to give as much detail as we can provide. So I appreciate the line of inquiry for sure.
Nancy?
Thanks. So I just want to remark that as I look at this breaking down of hours and things like that, and so we're about halfway through the year, so that's about 1,000 hours per person, right? And so as I look at this, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me that Emily would be spending nearly all her time on this. And we have some, you know, Astor with some of Evan and some of Bailey. So a lot of Carrie Sandeman. I'm kind of surprised there's a little less of Colin, but I guess I'll just say that being able to look at this, this is as much detail as I want. Although I wouldn't mind like just some bullet points of, yeah, these things are the major things we're working on and we accomplish them. So I guess I'm asking for maybe a different level, and I'm happy for you to provide as much as possible, but just I appreciate this.
I think an initial narrative approach would be something we could easily pull together. Getting into the tracking of the hours might be a little more complicated, but I think it's a path we'd like to get on.
Annie?
So questions more about this, would you like us to defer these to the next meeting when Lori's back?
You're welcome to raise them here so that the whole board hears as well, and we're definitely wanting to follow up. So if they're super complicated, I just want to warn you that I would want to engage Lori's awesome brain before we provide detailed answers. So.
Yeah, just looking at, we're, 446 for the 6 months. What are we looking at till the end of the fiscal year? And we've got an average rate of, it looks like about $138 an hour.
And so that does include all the benefits, all the leave balances and administrative overhead.
Sick,
also.
vacation, pay, PERS,
Yeah.
healthcare, loaded costs.
It does include.
Yes.
Right. Because it looks like these are about an average, probably about 287,000 per year, right? When 138 hours times 2,080.
Yeah, that would be an annual.
Yeah. Just trying to figure out.
I don't want to confirm your math without sitting down and looking at it, but yeah.
Okay.
On the March 16th agenda, we have the adjusted forecast on the agenda and starting the budget process. So
We can just take this up then if that's. Okay.
And if there's any specific questions, please, I mean, again, we want to provide answers or admit we can't, right? We really want you to feel confident that you have the information you need.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Emily?
So I have just a brief question, or not a comment, a question and a comment, but I appreciate the detail given here. And I know there's a lot of experience on staff and with the board. I work primarily on capital engineering projects, so everyone is assigned project numbers. We have phases of capital projects and types of work, probably 30, 40 different types of work, from public involvement to engineering to project management to geotechnical, et cetera. That structure works well for us. As you know, it gets more difficult when you get into operating projects and planning projects, people who work more on the operating side. But I don't have an immediate need now, but it sounds like maybe some board members will in the future want greater granularity on where staff spend time. And while we have time, it might be good to contact other public agencies and utilities and see how they deal with their cost objects and accounting for time, because particularly on the operating side, again, because it's more difficult. And the only reason I mention it is because, again, for capital projects, it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward. For operating projects, I've seen situations where people in planning, for example, really only bill to one type of work or cost object, and it gets a little bit difficult to really understand how different positions are allocated to programs and outcomes. So again, I don't have an immediate need. I appreciate the detail here, but it might be good to, as Laura gets back, to sketch out a timeline for what is needed and by when. Thank you.
Just a quick update. We have installed a new digital HR module, and we have our first recruitments out on that. And that will also maintain our employee records and retention data and so on. And that gives us better controls, and we have records that track all of that. We are currently testing a procurement module that will provide encumbrances based on contract awards and purchase orders, which we currently have to do by hand. That's in testing mode now. And I know Lori and our finance team are really interested in developing a digital module for our payroll. We're currently using Excel and printing those out by hand and entering them into our payroll system that's a vendor. So we have that on the horizon as an important project to tackle. And I think that's when we'd probably be in a better position to work with the board on what level of coding you all are going to want to see. If this board is interested in us advancing that sooner, we may need some help with our friends Corky on MCDD. So thank you.
Are we ready to transition to the property rate and insurance comparisons? Any other questions before we go? Not seeing any.
So this is just another kind of update on ongoing work. Colin and I worked with Frank Stratton from Special District Association of Oregon to talk through getting some estimates for flood insurance rates if the levies were to not be certified. And so Colin and I were able to have a discussion with some representatives from a company that is involved with an NFIP reinsurer, and they kind of explained how they could calculate those rates for us, they can model likely flooding scenarios and with that higher risk to give us like projected likely premiums. And so that's ongoing. And I imagine when we come with like a more complete recommendation, we'll be able to give you that for a comparison to give you an understanding of what those rates might be. So just letting you know that's still in progress.
Sure.
And so, first of all, thank you for that. It's really important that we start to be able to describe to our constituents what the impact will be if we aren't certified. And this is yet again an example of how we do that, how we convince people that it's in their best interest to go forward. At the same time that we look at that, I think that we need to also recognize that the business community needs to have both an understanding of their property damage risk, but also of their business interruption loss risk, which is a different level of insurance that FEMA really doesn't cover as a direct element. And again, this is so that we can explain to the business interests in the flood district and beyond why it's in their best interest to spend a little bit of money in prevention as opposed to pound sterling in cure. So.
Yeah, what we're looking at is only the building and not even contents because of like, I just gave him sample properties of people that I don't know. And so that's what at least this work will be limited to. But as far as other data, there's a variety of reports out there that kind of include that stuff, and that can definitely be part of the greater narrative when we have a full recommendation.
Okay, excellent. So if you need additional information on business loss insurance, be happy to provide whatever I know on that, so that as businesses in this area look at what the impact of a 5-day shutdown of their business could be, that they're fully aware of what it would cost them.
Any other questions? Seeing none online, hearing none here in the room, let's transition on to Aster, the communications update. Okay. So we're gonna skip
Hey.
C.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear what Wendy said.
Sorry, Esther, I was suggesting that we go to guiding principles next.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're up, crew. So we've had just a reminder, stepping back and talking about process on the guiding principles. You know, we as a board had some disagreements kind of about the document and where it should go. The path forward that we chose to chart was to ask a few board members to get together that kind of represented a broad interest to the board, not in an official capacity, but just to look at the language and try to see if there was edits that could be made to get broader board support. And I just want to kind of remind folks, I guess, that of a few things while we were looking at those documents or that document. We're really trying to keep this at a policy level. We're not trying to get the document to a point where it's getting into operations or into future board decisions or anything like that. This is not, what we're going to bring back is not an official recommendation, because we are not an official committee of the board. We are just a group of board members getting together to help advance this item. What you're going to get from us, I believe, and this is really encouraging to me as we've looked at the document, we were kind of asking the question, can we make edits to this document to get broad support, or do we need to kind of start from scratch in some areas? And I believe we're at a point where we can keep the existing document to start and just make some edits and bring it back to the board and have the board add to it and create a document that we can work from. But I'm really encouraged because I feel like at least in the discussions that we've had as separate, but a group of board members, it feels like we've got some good synergy. So I'm doing the high level. I'm going to pass it over to Eric to kind of dive into a little bit more of the details of what we've been talking about. We've met So we've met twice. We've had, it feels like three. We've had the assistance of Sarah O'Brien as facilitator and really kind of collector of our comments. And so that's been very helpful. And so after Eric gets into some of the details of what we've been kind of working through, Nancy's going to finish it up with kind of a new element that we determined, which are these examples to really ferret out kind of one of the key questions, and she'll talk more about that. So Eric, do you want to?
Excellent. Thank you so much. So let me first begin by saying what was our top priority? And that was to clarify the relationship between flood safety and our other mandates. We recognize that flood safety and the levee recertification is the primary driver of why we're here. But there needs to be a rational nexus between flood safety and our other mandates. That flood safety, while it's first among equals, the sort of chief justice of the Supreme Court, there are no unimportant mandates. And that what we're looking for is to bring this together into an integrated solution of flood management. And we'll get into some examples of that, of what we mean, but that's going to be a really pretty detailed discussion between the three of us so that we can have commentary associated with the document that can provide guidance to future boards. Then we started to look at the revenue mechanism. And there, what we found was that at the core of it was sufficient funding for the operations and the capital needs. And the capital needs really driven by our asset management approach. We wanted the engineering to really drive when these projects would be put forward. That the revenue mechanism that we have is commensurately connected to services and benefits. People that benefit more should pay more, and that but that rate structure must recognize the need to be progressive and equitable. That even though somebody with less means benefits greatly, they may not have the capability to be able to pay for it on a simple way. Flexibility, ease of implementation and administration. And then in addition to the document that you see, that you have seen, is the need to be flexible to adapt to changing circumstances. That flexibility will also flow through when we talk about fiscal responsibility. So another element of our discussion was around our duty to ratepayers to be effective and efficient stewards of their payments. Now, this fiscal responsibility is indeed equity driven, that the burden falls hardest on the least wealthy, that we recognize that there is intergenerational equity. That is to say, don't kick the can down the road and assume that somebody 10 years is going to pay for this. And then to also incorporate income disability as an additional equity lens. We looked at this in terms of our partnerships being driven around the programs that we design, whether they be for emergency management or for flood safety, and that our partners have the capability to deliver the required results and thereby avoid duplication, leverage expertise outside of our organization, and be a cost-effective trade-off. Again, recognizing that for future boards, we need to have some element of ongoing flexibility. As a result of our conversations, there were a number of issues that weren't raised directly, but have become important for us to begin to discuss. And we call these our parking lot issues. And they will address elements like level of service, river versus flash floods, productivity requirements, details of best practices around risk management, the recognition of levee impacts on water quality and fish, and the particular challenge that we have of creating a public good that gives rise to freeloading, where people would not pay for our unit, where the levy can't refuse to protect them just because they haven't paid for it. So all of these are elements that will come through in our future discussions. Steve, anything I missed there?
You captured it pretty well.
And so it was interesting as we only met a couple times, but when we started talking about examples of what we meant, we found that we weren't that far from each other. And that was a big eye opener. And so as part of our work coming forward that we're going to distribute to the board so that we can have a broader board discussion, we'll also put some things, we'll work through some examples, sort of what's in, what's out. It's a way of, well, I'm not going to use that analogy. It's not very good. But anyway, we're going to work through some examples, what's in and what's out. I'm sure we'll have those in our discussions as well, because it's possible that the larger board is also a little bit closer than we think they are, than we think we are on the all the work we're doing going forward, including the new mandates from the legislation.
And just a reminder, we're not bringing back a recommendation to you. We're bringing back a starting place for you to add to, amend, and then for us as a board to work through to get to the final place we need to be. We'll just open it up. I see a couple hands up. Wood Village, Seth, you're first, and then Dave.
Yeah, just a question. Is there a document that Eric was referring to that's included in the packet or was sent out, or is that kind of your guys' draft that will be sent out in the future?
I meant to say this, Seth. Yes, we're going to be putting the track change edits together. We're close and sending that out to the board. In my view, kind of when we talk about these concepts high level, it's easy to get a little bit worried that we're not on the same page. But when I looked at the document and I saw how we were actually applying these things, it made a lot more sense. So there was a bit of a chicken and egg thing here. Do we get some kind of board approval of the direction we're going and then work on the edits, or work on the edits, send it out to the board and see how close we are? And that's, I think, the direction we're going.
So the short answer is no, you don't have this.
No. And thank you. And Steve, I just want to let you know, I think that that's a good approach, and I look forward to seeing that when you guys are done.
Mr. Rittmer.
Basically the same question is, what I mean, keep referring to a document. I believe I have seen what you're talking about, but I'm not sure.
Yes, this was the.
I don't know why you're reluctant to share the document you guys are meeting and discussing. I can't think of any reason why that would be a problem. So
it's just because. Sorry, Dave.
I'm just asking, why don't you share it after the meeting or something? If you can, I mean, I know you're working on it and that's fine, but.
Thanks, Dave. My response to that would be, it's just not quite ready yet. We're very close. We didn't quite have the time we needed to make sure that we were all there, but we're going to send that out and discuss it at the next meeting. Yeah, Wendy.
So this is the document that I think the board received last November and then had an executive session on in December. And so you have that original one. And so they're working on some draft changes, and the draft changes are what hasn't been shared with the entire board yet. But I think they're coming soon.
They're coming soon.
All right, thanks.
And I'm happy to email that out to you again, Dave.
Well, if I've already got it, I'll look for it. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind, that would be easier.
It was.
I'd be glad to.
I believe it was in the December 19th, 2022 packet. The draft that they've started working on.
We'll send it to you, Dave, so it's at the top of the pile.
Thank you.
Or you can wait for the edited version from us.
Better version.
We'll see. Any questions, suggestions, comments? Hearing none, are we moving back now to the communications update? Okay, Aster, you're up.
Sounds good. So we just have a brief update for you. When Wendy sent out the board meeting packet, she also sent out a one-pager that spells out those talking points that Noah presented on last week. So we're here in case you have any remaining questions about those talking points. And then Jamie is also going to give an update about our progress developing a flood-safe Columbia River website.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And this is a teaser. So we have, we've built a website. Folks, hopefully people can see it. I was going to do some slides, but it's more interesting to show it in a dynamic way. And so that's what you'll be seeing here. The website isn't live in that, you know, it's still, we have some functionality that we're still working on. I'm just going to scroll through this main page just so you can see it. And Aster, is it coming through okay?
It is. Looks good on my screen.
Okay, good. So, you know, the key messages conversation that we had with you or at your last meeting and that you'll see in the memo, I mean, that language is present on the website. And so we try to start out the website with on the main page with something that grabs them. And, you know, when you'll go to the website, you'll see that we tried to keep it very simple. And we pulled from the polling around concepts and images that resonated with the public, that made them want to learn more. And so I'm just going to keep scrolling down. We also pulled a lot of the good information that was on the LRC website forward and put it here so that it lives here. Things that aren't getting pulled forward from that website will live on the MCDD website. So if this is what's happened before, and then we move right into, you know, these are really very recent images of things that are happening around us today. As you can see, as I've highlighted it, these things are dynamic. You can click on them. You can find out more information. This is real-time global events that we're going to have at the bottom of the website. Will be continually refreshed and updated with real-time global flood events to kind of keep the heat on for people as they come to this, so they can say, oh my gosh, you know, these things are occurring, you know, around our region, around the nation, around the world on a regular basis. And it's all up to date. Because one of the things that we mentioned when we heard from the polling is, while Vanport, you know, was a really tragic and horrific event, it was a long time ago, and a lot of folks just don't have that connection. So rooting them in what today's flood safety risks are is one of the objectives of the website. And then, of course, you know, the contact page and where people can get more information. So it's just a bit of a teaser. It's I'm not going to click through the items at the top. And our intent is to make this live in, have Aster introduce it in the website that they do in this month. And Aster, when will that come out? It's at the end of the month?
Did you mean the newsletter?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
sorry.
so for those that don't know, I administer a quarterly, what I called flood safety seasonal newsletter for the drainage districts, and would love to highlight the Flood Safe Columbia River initiative so that people start to familiarize themselves with it, members of the public, and would love to highlight the website on that newsletter, which I'm hoping to send out later this month, probably late February.
Yep. Yeah, so our timing is to launch it by then, but we wanted to give you a sneak preview before you read about it in your e-news so that you had a sense of what was coming. Mary Helen?
What about the people that don't have, or can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, what about the people that don't have internet connection, don't have a laptop, don't use electronic forms? Is there going to be any way to reach them? Because we have quite a few in our neighborhood because of low income housing.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And that's part of the, you'll see us starting to implement the broader education and engagement program that we've brought before you. And there are paper copies of materials that are built into that, Mary Helen, for exactly that reason. And also because we're going to be doing what's called tabling events, where we're at partner organization events in the spring and in the summer, so people can speak to folks one-on-one, and we'll want to be able to send hard copy things home with folks there as well.
So is the messaging going to be, this is what might happen, or do, I guess I kind of mean, I had to join late because I had another medical appointment. But will this message be sent out, this is what's going to happen, or are we just assuming that it will and everything will go fine and the GO bond will pass and we can move forward? I mean, I know it's all positive, but I'm always sort of the BCP person in the room of what are you going to do if it doesn't pass? And then we've already told them it will happen, and the level of trust will go down and say, well, it's not going to happen until we get the money, and we won't get the money until we charge you, but we can't tell them what they're being charged for.
Yep. Well, I think you just encapsulated the last 2 years worth of board meetings and conversations in that 30-second question, Mary Helen. So yes, all of these things are in play. We're moving forward in the initial education and engagement on on building that foundation, because one of the things we found from the polling is people don't even know that these districts exist and what you do. And that's part of it. And then the other part of it is people aren't very aware of the flood risk. And so that's the second part. So it's not making promises, it's more letting people know what's already, what we already have and what the risks are. And then their part in that is to hopefully support us moving forward. So there's more to come, Mary Helen, but keep those questions coming.
Well, yeah, I've been doing it for a couple, or at least a year. But one other point is, I noticed in the flyer that we got in our packet that it was referred to as the Vanport flood. And I've long had the experience of meeting with, well, actually somebody from NOAA came to a board meeting probably about 2 years ago, and also to a Levee Ready Columbia. And they don't refer to it as the Vanport flood. They refer to it as the Columbia River flood of 1948 or the flood of 1948, because there was far more impact in Camas, Washington financially, and as far as Roseburg and north to British Columbia. And so in being able to, if we're just going to refer to it as the Vanport flood and 650 acres, then we're not, I guess we're not utilizing the fact of how vast destruction can be from a flood, and why that railroad embankment broke was because of the force of the flood, not because it was just a bad embankment.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And that's why you are our board historian, Mary Helen. So I really appreciate you clarifying that, and we'll make those changes in the
I forget the name of the guy's name at NOAA. He was like the environmental scope kind of person, and he couldn't have said enough times, no, you don't call it the Vanport flood. It was much bigger than that. So I think that emphasizes the fact of the damage that a flood can do.
Good point. Thank you, Mary Helen. Emerald?
Thanks. I'm really not good at this yet, Jim. Thank you. New to this board, but not new to political messaging, and particularly I just want to speak up and say this is really strong work. And it's really hard to make people conceptualize something they should be afraid of that they've never seen in their lifetimes. Right. So and invest in any type of prevention. And so it's really nuanced messaging. This is really strong work, and I really appreciate the opinion research that went into it. It helps us understand the language to use that people will recognize and that will resonate. And then the good news is you can back it up with what's true, right? We can back all of these things up with real investments. So I just wanted to speak up with kudos. This is good.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
A question for you, Jamie, again, building off of Emerald's comment. We've got some really powerful logos and a name for this. Is this likely the direction that you would take us in changing from the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District to a new name?
It's so great that you ask that, Eric. So,
But it rolls off the tongue so well.
so I mean, it's really up to the new board to brand themselves and what their identity is. However, we wanted to provide you with some very strong, some really strong and solid work to build from. And so, it could be that that you move in a direction where you keep the logo and colors, and maybe there's a different some different words that you use to kind of bridge over, or the new district does something else. But we were trying to set you up in a really strong position with the investments that you're making now in communications to serve you well in the future.
And I think that this is important because what you've highlighted is how our constituents are going to respond to it. And it appears that something that really ties our mission back to flood safety and the Columbia River is critical, and that everyone, even people in the further reaches of the urban growth boundary, would be able to conceptualize and agree with.
Yeah.
Sounds like I should pull back my offer to sell the naming rights to the new agency to a crypto trading organization.
Yeah.
That's how we fund the projects, but.
But I think to your point, Eric, we want to make sure that the investments that you're making in the communications work that you're doing now, it is as long lasting as possible, for as long as you would like it, and to use it and as relevant for as long as possible.
Nancy?
Okay, so this is kind of a typo, but I know it's not really a typo, so that's why I'm doing it in this whole organization. So I just want to say that the word toxin means something that's produced by a plant or animal, like snake venom or tritatotoxin or something like that. Even peyote can be a toxin. And if we're talking about PCBs or a lot of the pollutants that are man-made, they're not toxins. They're either toxic compounds or toxicants. And so I cringe a little bit every time I say pollutants described as toxins, because they're not. Now, if you want to make a decision that you're going to use that word anyway, that's fine. I will not bring this up again. I just wanted to take an educational moment.
And just like I gave kudos to Mary Helen for being the historian, it's wonderful to have our science folks on the board as well. So really appreciate that, Nancy.
More opportunity once it's allowed to. That's the beauty of a website. You can change it.
About toxic pollutants.
That works too.
Rather
That's
than
good.
yeah.
Yeah, any of those things, just toxins are natural.
Okay. Questions, comments before we move to Jim with his revenue collection update? Kenny?
I know we're more conceptual at this point, but have we done any more research about the impacts of compression?
We have asked Echo Northwest to dust off the previous analysis and update it. And we are working on some numbers based on what we've received from the county assessor's office on the current fiscal year compression impacts that we will be sharing soon with the format group, and we'd be happy to share with this group as well. Is there a particular aspect of compression that you're thinking of that I didn't cover there? Because I'm interested in making sure you get what you need information wise.
Well, basically like what the differential impact is going to be, and then like, who's going to be exempt, who isn't. from the bond. That's gonna have an impact out in the real world too.
We haven't done an impact of compression on a bond because voter approved bonds are not subject to compression.
Okay. What
Now,
about,
there may be some exemptions for public entities. I would turn to Hong or one of the other lawyers because I have a dangerous level of knowledge about that. I think that's the sort of next topic of conversation for this board is getting into the bond scenarios. We have a lot of work to do in terms of timing of bonds, stepping of bonds, ratings, what qualifies, what doesn't qualify. We have a huge range of projects from PMLS to FEMA to the assets and liabilities that you guys need to talk about, and which ones do you want to fit in here at what cost. We have identified the cost per thousand based on the current assessed value of urban Multnomah County for a range of options for you. We've shared that with a few of you and we're polishing that to bring to you really soon. Somewhere between 14 and 17 cents for $150 to $200 million per thousand based on current assessed values. We're seeing compression impacts in MCDD this fiscal year of about $1 million in losses from what we levied to what we received.
big number?
It is a big number. We're hoping the economy will turn around and the assessed value of urban Multnomah County is going to skyrocket. I know all my other agency partners expect that. That's fine. Thank you for letting me know.
Kind of a transition to.
Yeah.
the next item.
I'll pick this up this time. Thank you, Wendy. Sorry for those of you who couldn't hear. I'm actually going to turn it over to Colin, but I'll just let folks know coming in that we've been doing a lot of work on this revenue collection opportunity and challenge, as you all know, and we've had some really terrific help from City of Portland and from other jurisdictions, particularly the local cities. And I guess I'm going to leave the mic drop to Colin, but we're going to need some help from you all in moving this thing forward. So Colin's going to go through what we've learned recently and a few ideas we have that we hope will inspire you all to keep this effort moving. So with that, I'll turn it to Colin and expect this to be an interesting conversation. And I appreciate your ongoing support for figuring this out.
Thanks, Jim. And for those online that have headphones on, I won't actually drop this mic for your hearing. Bad joke. So as you all know, one of the key responsibilities of this board is to come up with a operating revenue strategy. And we've been doing a lot of work. The board has done work. The technical advisory group has done a lot of work, as well as staff and our consulting support from Echo Northwest. And so we've been moving forward with a revenue model that meets legal and technical sufficiency. And we have while we've been developing that technical work, we've also been looking at some of the implementation needs. So how do we actually collect this direct billing, being included on city utility bills and other things available for the service fee that was identified. And so we have delivered to you, and you all have seen, based on that revenue forecast, information about the direct billing and all the costs associated with that. So we know that that is very expensive, as you saw. But as we've been looking at some of the implementation costs, especially around the city utility billing, we've also found some additional challenges. And so those relate to nexus and proportionality requirements, differential rates between cities and us applying our rate based on that nexus. And then things, technical challenges like programming and software, customer service, and really just updating people's existing software. We also have a lot of new information coming in, especially around direct billing and challenges that the houseless services and the pre-K for all collection has been down about 1/3, so 2/3 people paying it. So we know that the challenges for direct billing are even more challenging than what we had previously thought. So given all of this, we've been really working hard and really appreciate the support of the cities coming in a really positive way, trying to figure out how to make this work. But we're really coming to nearing the conclusion that the revenue options that are currently available and the collection methods of that revenue are pretty unworkable. And so as well-intentioned as the legislation was, we are likely to need some kinds of fixes to that. So we've been discussing these challenges with a number of board members and also with different staff members throughout the city, county, metro, and port. And I think the good news to share is that there really are workable options. There are really good options to explore and to move forward. Staff is developing a list of those options, and we have some further conversations to do, but we would like to bring those options back to this board at the next meeting. So we hope to have a memo ready the end of next week, and we have a meeting, I believe, on March 1st. And so we'd at least like to discuss what those options that we see are. We also know that you all have great ideas, so encourage you to reach out to me or Jim, any of those revenue options that you have. And so we will be presenting both near and long-term solutions that we see needed. So there might be a need for being able to bridge to a long-term solution, something that sort of is an interim fix. And then we do know that we'll want to be able to work with all the partners sitting around this table, just like we did going back in 2017 when we came up with the first set of revenue options, to go through things that are both politically or technically, legally feasible, but also politically possible. So we know there's a lot of work to be done there, and really look forward to working through that with you all. And at this point right now, we haven't slammed the brakes on all the work because there's so much to be done, but we have basically, as far as developing the revenue model with Echo Northwest based around the service fee, we're asking them to pause on that work as we really figure out what the next steps are and how to best use their time to further our needs. So again, if there are specific ideas that you have, encourage you all to reach out to Jim and I, and looks like Jim has a closing note there.
Yeah, and just we really want to be super transparent with everyone about this because it's kind of a fundamental change. So I just want to give you an update on the conversation staff is having. So we've reached out to the representatives on the urban board who are municipal representatives and county representatives, metro representatives, because those are the agencies we're going to rely on under the current methodology to collect. We also are working with our chair to have a meeting with the East County city managers, and I believe we're scheduled for February 22nd to share some of these challenges and potential opportunities with them. And we're working to, I just set up a meeting today with the CFO of the county after checking in with Commissioner Stegman in her office. So we're just starting to socialize the concept that, hey, this revenue method is pretty tricky, and most people have been reading the papers lately about the preschool for all and other taxes. So I remain hopeful that there's a method. I also believe that a shift in the method could address some of the concerns we've heard from the board, and in particular concerns about cost allocation and how those are going to be equitable geographically and otherwise. So there may be some opportunities here to address some of those concerns, and that's what we're really focused on. And we're going to come back here with all of our ideas before they're implemented, because we need all of you to support these ideas for it to work. So I just wanted to share that with you. We regret bringing you this news, but we also see some real opportunities to develop a better, more resilient system going forward. So more to come.
Step back, take two forward. Eric, actually, I saw Seth's hand up first and then Eric.
Hey, Jim. Thanks for giving that update. I wanted to let you guys all know that we had an opening at our city council meeting on Tuesday, and we ended up presenting an update on urban flood safety and water quality. And I won't bore you with all the technical details, but the message from staff was there's still work to do in terms of the cost allocation and operating expense model that's being worked on, but we asked them the question, if we can get something reasonable in terms of the cost allocation and overall operating expenditures, what is the feeling on council for whether or not they'd be willing to put the charge on the utility bill? And I don't want to call you Nostradamus, but no one was happy with that question. But everyone on the council said, yes, if there's something that's reasonable and we feel is equitable, and this is the best method of collecting it, then the feedback was that Wood Village would be interested in moving forward with that. So I look forward to hearing more of what you guys are putting together and in getting that allocation and operating revenue expenditure level to refine the level we can actually take something concrete to our council for formal approval. But I wanted to check in with them to make sure that they were at least willing to engage in that. And we also talked about the general obligation bond and the level that you guys were looking for in the kind of 150 to $200 million range. And they all agreed that the price tag was high, but the improvements were needed. I did put a plug in to see if any of our elected officials would be interested in working on a campaign for that. And they were going to think about it. But wanted to give you guys the update that we at least had that conversation. And I didn't get any feedback that was going to be a major roadblock from moving forward. And I look forward to hearing more from you and working with the other cities and jurisdictions on having that conversation.
Thank you, Seth. Appreciate the update and the help.
So Eric and then Mary Helen.
So Colin and Jim, will any of the alternatives require us to go back to the legislature for a change in ORS 550?
I think the short answer is yes. That's definitely one of the solutions, is going back to Salem. And there's a number of fixes that will be considered, so that will be listed as some of the options.
Okay. Will it affect our timeline for the GO bond or dissolution?
Not necessarily. So from the fixes that were done during the 22 legislative session, you as the interim board can move forward with the general obligation bond. And I think we'll do some additional analysis as far as if there's any issues with potentially a different path on revenue and how that might relate to actually selling the bonds. So we'll be able to provide more. We might not be able to provide details. That's more legal analysis. And I know Hong is working on that. That might not be ready as far as the list of options, but it's something that we'll be able to follow up with.
Thank you.
And just to kind of punctuate the time frame, the experience we've had with this effort thus far is if this community is together, the legislature is going to help us. If there's opposition, we're done. So it will really rely on this board to settle in on potential fixes that could work and meet all of the important interests that are at this table. So needs. So that's what we're looking for as staff. And again, we're also identifying the fact that depending on the fix we want to move through the legislature, it may take more than one session, in which case we're developing some backup plans for interim funding options that the boards, both the legacy boards and the urban board, will need to consider. So those are the things we're trying to assess through staff contacts, the political feasibility of different options before we invest a lot of time and energy in the legal analysis and engaging you in them. So again, if any of you want more information or want to engage in a conversation about this, I would really appreciate the time. So just reach out to me and we'll schedule it.
Mary Helen.
Just to reiterate kind of and feed on what Seth said, I was part of a focus group with some North Portland neighbors with Travis Nelson, the representative of District 44, and nobody had any trouble paying for needed costs and to keep people safe. It's just not clear what those steps are. And so I think that for me, from what I was hearing was, I think sort of what you just said, Jim, the representatives aren't going to support anything that the neighbors don't. And what he was hearing from this group of like 12 select neighbors was, we don't mind paying, but we want to know what we're paying for. And you've heard me say that any number of times. So if we can get to that point, I think then I would be able to generate support within the neighborhood. Without that, I can't go out and say, give me money to put in my bag and I'll spend it for you. So that description was somebody else's, but that's basically how the concept was being received by the neighbors. So, and I know you've been in contact with Travis Nelson, so it's important to me to be able to sell this to the people that are going to vote or make their voices heard, and that I'm clear on what the costs are, and I'm still not. So that kind of information would be really helpful for me.
I think I'm right behind you in the line of looking forward to knowing what this board is going to improve in terms of the bond and the operating revenues, Mary Helen. I'm excited to get to those numbers and look forward to your guidance as a board on what those numbers look like. We'll be refining the bond ask here over the next 2 months. And again, we hope to bring a revised operating forecast to you in March. So we're zeroing in on those, but ultimately until the board decides, I can't answer those questions for you.
Questions, discussion? Still have some time. Everybody would like a few minutes back in their day probably. So I won't go too far here, but. Going once. Going twice.
Steve, is this going to be the end of the meeting?
Yeah.
Well then, can I just take 30 seconds to thank everybody that sent me well wishes for my heart valve replacement surgery.
Of course.
Don't ignore your heart. I was really strengthened by all the well wishes and support from all sorts of people, and I want to tell everybody, take care of your heart, eat right, exercise, and make sure that you recognize the symptoms when they occur, because I did not. So I think with the support of friends, associates, and even people I didn't know, it was very supportive, and I appreciate all of that from all the people in this room and beyond. So thank you very much.
Welcome back, Mary Helen.
Thanks, Mary Helen. We're glad you're okay.
Yeah, you seem to have more of your old energy back, which is awesome. I'm glad you're feeling.
Well, I was going to say, look out, Jim, because now I've got more energy.
No, it's good. We need you. We need you. We appreciate
Well,
you.
I'm still, I'll just tell you this. The doctor said that I had to follow the Goldilocks theory, not too little and not too much, and that he was worried about me going beyond not too much. And so I've been guided by my cat and my husband to not do too much, but it's really hard when you're feeling better than you felt in an entire year.
I bet. Well, thanks for all your time, Mary Helen. I'm glad you're feeling better.
On that high note, I think we're going to adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Gavel.
Perfect.
And gavel.